All right. And then he talks about racism, right? America's original and ongoing sin. And he says racism is America's original and ongoing sin. It is more than personal prejudice, it is prejudice plus power, right? And he says in the United States, racism manifests itself in an ideology of white supremacy, the idea that whites are superior to people of other races and ethnicities, and that society should be organized to maintain and protect the power and property of white people. So that's the original and ongoing sin of America is this racism where whites are superior, they have the power, and they should be protect that power and superiority, and property should be protected there. So that's the original sin.
Right. And so as a society focused, we want to revolutionize that, right? We want to overthrow that. Virtue ethicist Stanley Hauerwas argues that the first task of the church is to be the church. Okay? Rejecting justice as a bad idea for Christians, he argues that Christians should develop their ethical analysis through being uninvolved in the politics of our society and involved in the polity of the church. He ontologizes the church, focusing on its being the community rather than it doing the work of love and justice in and for the community. This is problematic in several ways, of course. The mere existence of the church as an alternative community of virtue does not necessarily inspire and equip its members to engage in the work of social transformation. The church as contrast community of virtue does not give an account of how structural sins like racism are part of the structures of congregational and community life. In fact, its silence may make it complicit with them. So again, you have to be active. You can't just be passive in poo-pooing of racism and all the ilks of that here in America.
Right.
That's only where he's talking about is only in America.
Right. So you can't be a called out group, right? As the church, you have to be involved and engaged in the social processes and the social inequalities and fighting against them as the church has to be involved in that is what he's getting at here.
Yeah.
So that's part of the love and justice that he wants to focus on. All right, so he moves now from he's talked about Jesus as a revolutionary, and then how he improvises with regard to love and justice. He talks about America's original and ongoing sin, racism, and now he gives some other illustrations here. He talks about Martin Luther King Jr. and the beloved community. He says, calling for the church to confess the sin of racism, King publicly repents of racism through his faith-rooted organizing for racial justice from the deepest wells of Christian faith. In contrast to the tributaries of vices, King calls for justice to roll on like a river, Amos 5:24. So large-hearted love was both the means and the end of the civil rights movement. The end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. So apparently, society is to become the beloved community. And this reconciliation and redemption is part of what we're supposed to be doing.
Right. Well, this is only Martin Luther King's version of it. But if you take the Malcolm X approach, then reconciliation is not the end goal whatsoever. So, what part of the civil rights movement are we focusing on here? It seems to me like
who are we focusing on? Is society to be redeemed? Is that what the Christian message is all about? Let's redeem society.
Yeah. When we go to heaven, we'll see society there, and it will be redeemed, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have to talk about this interesting person, which I did find. I flipped the page in my book, and it was interesting to see here. But he's going to talk about Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Right. So here's another illustration that he gives us. Right. Yeah. So we've seen King and now Bonhoeffer.
Right. So he's going to talk about Bonhoeffer's Black Jesus. It was the Sermon on the Mount rather than the doctrine of the passive resistance that initially inspired the Negroes to dignified social action. It was the Jesus of Nazareth that stirred the Negroes to protest in the creative weapon of love, said Martin Luther King. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount was central to the prophetic Black Christianity, which echoes heard in the sermon of Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Sr. at Abyssinian Baptist Church, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer was enraptured by Powell's preaching while attending Abyssinian during the Sloan Fellowship at Union Theological Seminary in 1930 and 1931. And if you want to read Eric Metaxas' book on this, he does have a big portion in here. It was something that I definitely learned in reading that book, was just how inspired Bonhoeffer was in the Black Southern churches when he visited here at when he was in seminary.
Yeah, yeah. He says, according to Reggie Williams, Powell's sermon, A Hungry God and a Naked God, offered an innovative interpretation of Matthew 25:31 through 46, having a lasting impact on Bonhoeffer's theology and ministry. Powell helped Bonhoeffer, he tells us, to see the Black Jesus, quote, right, who is presented in our fellow humans who are hungry, thirsty, naked, imprisoned, and so forth. The insight that Jesus is co-sufferer hidden in Black suffering, he tells us, helps Bonhoeffer's experience Christ in the suffering of others. And so through his experience in the Black church in Harlem, Bonhoeffer returned to Germany prepared to empathetically enter the experience of Jews who were being oppressed by the Nazis, placing his own body on the line in solidarity with the Jews. So there, Bonhoeffer was, kind of transformed, I guess, right? And motivated by Powell's sermon and to identify with the people who were oppressed in the German society.
Yeah, maybe.